Minasan konnichiwa und welcome. And today is another review. And today we're going to be talking about an HBO classic, Happily Ever After, Fairy Tales for Every Child. Known in Latin America and Spain as Por Siempre Felices, Conducir a Todos los Niños. But we're going to be talking about two specific episodes, which are Cinderella and Thumbelina. We'll start with the former first. In Cinderella, Cinderella's mother had recently died, so the father decided to marry a widow of high society. But of course, that evil old stepmother, or La Madrastra, was not a kind woman at all. She only married the man for his wealth and fortune. And she made sure her own two daughters knew the importance of wealth. Which, of course, is bullshit. Then, a scene later, her old Madrastra has forced Cinderella to do all those endless chores. Yeah, it's pretty much like in the original story, but with a Latino flair. And of course, Cinderella's only amigos are a little mouse and two lizards, or ocosos, as she mentions later in the episode. And then, in the scene involving the castle, El Rey was talking to his son Prince Felipe, or Príncipe Felipe in Spain and Latino, about marriage. And all the other kings have grandchildren already. But Prince Felipe doesn't even have a wife. Voiced by Jimmy Smits, by the way. So, Prince Felipe and his dad, El Rey, decided to throw a ball, or a fiesta. Then later in the title character's household, we see Cinderella, voiced by Daphne Zuniga, rescue a mouse from one of her Madrastra's mouse traps. Women usually hate mice, but this one's an exception. And then she receives an invitation to a ball held by El Rey y Príncipe Felipe. And then her stepmother and two stepsisters are obviously freaking out because of the two lizards, or iguanas, or ocosos if you live in Spain or Latin America. And then the two ocosos sing a song about finding food and all that kind of shit. And then the two stepsisters and their mom, Cinderella's old Madrastra, went to the ball, and our title protagonist didn't, which is actually kind of sad if he's now to come to think of it. And then out of nowhere, her fairy madrina, voiced by Liz Torres, appears out of nowhere, and she sings a fabulous song about being La Fairy Madrina. Then after the song sequence ends, we are well, you know what I mean. Change the vegetables into a carriage, the two ocosos into a footman and a driver, and the two mice and the horses. And of course she changes Cinderella's rags into a beautiful ball gown, just like in the original story. And of course she fucks it up the first 2 times. But she got it right the 3rd time. And then she's off to the ball. But La Madrina forgot one thing. Once the clock strikes midnight, the spell will be broken. Everything will be back to normal, the way it was before. And Cinderella understood this. Later at the ball, Prince Felipe and her dad El Rey, voiced by Edward James Olmos, who would later voice El Mujurago in the Thumbelina episode, but that's for a different part. Soon we see Cinderella enter the castle. And of course, Prince Felipe could not keep his eyes off the beautiful maiden. And of course, La Madrina, voiced by Raquel Weisz, examines this. And then the relationship did try and go out to a good start, but the clock struck midnight, and Cinderella had to leave the palace immediately. Because I've seen this episode before. And then the next day, El Rey told his son Prince Felipe that he was not going to rest until he found the beautiful maiden whose foot fits into the glass slipper. Well, it's pretty much like in the original story by Charles Perrault and the Brothers Grimm. Then in that part with him and 6 other men, definitely reminded me of that Western classic, The Magnificent Seven, with Eli Wallach, James Coburn, and Yul Brynner. Then he tried to fit the glass slipper on her 2 stepsisters. But of course that never worked. And then, out of nowhere, Cinderella appears and wants to try on the glass slipper. And we all know it's actually her who wore those glass slippers the night of the ball. And then Cinderella and Prince Felipe were happily married. And they all lived happily ever after. Well, that's it for the infamous Cinderella episode. The next video will be the famous Thumbelina episode. The one with Rosie Perez and Harvey Fierstein.